Hello and welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. Hope everyone is doing well. Today I have 4 Reddit stories for you guys. All credit goes to the original posters of these stories, and I will link them in the description box. Strange man in my house. A strange man, middle-aged, came to my door Wednesday night at around 9 p.m. I opened my door, foolish I know, and peeped my head out because he was standing in my driveway after he knocked. I asked, "How can I help you?" He said, "I felt that I should come by and check on you." I repeated, "Check on me? I don't know you. Do you live in the neighborhood?" He said, "Yes, and I do live in the neighborhood." He pointed north. I said, "Okay." Then there was some silence because I was really confused about why he was at my property. He said, "I'm not trying to scare you." I said, "Well, you are, because I don't know who you are. And why are you here?" He said he thought we could talk. I said, "Talk? About?" He said he didn't know. I told him, "Sir, I think it's time for you to leave now." He motioned his ear to say he couldn't really hear me. He never stepped closer to hear me better. I said it was time for you to leave. He left promptly. I called my dad, boyfriend, cousin, and the non-emergency. The officers never came to my property or anything. I was advised by family to get a Ring camera, installed, and additional lighting. I live by myself on about an acre of land, but I do have neighbors. I got the Ring camera installed Friday afternoon. The man came back on Friday night at about 7:16. I heard a car pull up in my driveway. I peeped out of my bedroom window and I started to freak out because I saw his car, but I could not see him. The Ring live video was buffering and I didn't know where he was on my property because I could not see his shadow at my door from my bedroom. I called 911 immediately. He did the same thing captured on the Ring. He rung the bell and then stood away from the door, hands in his pockets, waiting for me to answer. I didn't, of course, because I was literally shaking with fear and on the phone with 911. At this point, I was looking desperately out of my curtain when he walked to his car and saw me looking at him from my window. He got in his car and drove away. After I got off the phone with 911, I called my neighbors right away. They came right away. They gave me a small pistol. I don't own any firearms yet. Needless to say, this has made me very nervous these last several days because I don't know what this man wants or if he will show up again. For anyone wondering why I opened my door and took time to speak with him, I actually thought he was confused. I don't know why I opened the door except that to say that I did feel like it was okay, because he wasn't in front of my door. He came off as confused during our conversation, but when I later mulled over it, that could have been a ploy to make me feel safe. I didn't take the bait. Any advice? Ideas of what I might be dealing with? Thanks. My grandma preferred I talk to her with my back turned. My grandma and I were always pretty close. When I was a young child, she taught me how to play the piano. We spent many nights playing all sorts of fun board games. She was a kind, loving heart, but she was stubborn to the core. She was stronger than anyone. However, I had lost contact with her after I left for college a few states away. She called a few times and we chatted the day away. I was shocked to hear only a few months later that she had become very sick. Her calls when she was sick had taken a strange turn. She was frantic and breathing heavily. She started saying things were following her and she was frightened. I tried to calm her down, but eventually my mom got concerned and went to go live with her. The calls stopped after that. Exactly a week ago, my mother texted me asking to look after Grandma. She had to go on an urgent business trip and couldn't leave Grandma with a stranger. I obliged and took the bus over. I had a few weeks off anyway, and I did miss the stubborn lady. I arrived at the house on Monday. My mom had left a few hours earlier. When I opened the door with luggage in my hand, I felt an overwhelming sadness. The house I remembered so clearly was just an echo of what it used to be. It was filthy and clearly had not been maintained like it used to. My mother had left a note on the fridge with everything I needed to do. Strangely, there was very little on the list besides all the basics like feeding, pills, dressing, bathing. There was one that stood out the most at the bottom. Underlined 3 times stood, "Don't get too close." My first thought was that was some kind of joke, but then again, my mother wasn't that joke type. How was I supposed to do all my tasks without getting too close? It seemed impossible. I pondered to myself, thinking my mother had a strange sense of humor after all. I wrote it off. I wish I hadn't. Seeing her in the flesh was a strange sight. She laid in her armchair all day in front of the TV. Her eyes were almost see-through with glassiness. Her mouth pressed tightly and her breathing was shallow and hoarse. I hated to think it, but it freaked me out. I gave her all her medicine and made sure to turn on the feeding tube exactly when it said to on the note. It was very precise. I got very close when I had to brush her teeth. I think she held her breath when I did it. She must have been nervous. I felt so bad for her. She didn't move or speak or react during these tasks. She just stared blankly at the screen. I had to almost pry her mouth open. On Tuesday, I woke up expecting her to at least have moved around in her sleep, but she was still in the exact same position in the armchair. She could have asked me to move her to her bed. I told her that she was welcome to ask me any time. No response. That afternoon, when I went to get her pills in the cupboard, I finally heard her speak. She said one word only, "Stay." I turned around instantly, expecting her to look at me with a sorrowful smile, but she was still in the exact same position. I turned back around and said, "I'm always here, you know that." "Of course I'll—" She cut me off. Her voice was strangely raspy. "Come closer." She was still staring at the screen with a blank gaze. "Grandma?" I tested the waters. Nothing. This was freaking me out. Was I hearing voices? Was she messing with me? Perhaps I needed a break. This was getting to me. I gave her all her medicine while attentively watching her for any movement. And on Wednesday morning, the realization hit me. She only spoke when I didn't look at her. But why? Maybe she was ashamed of the state she was in? It was strange, but I went with it, as I had not gotten any communication yet. I walked to the living room after a walk outside and turned back around. "Grandma? Are you okay? You haven't said much to me since I got here. I'm always here for you." "Closer?" Why did she want me so close? I hesitantly reverse walked to right beside her. "Closer?" That didn't sound like her. "Closer?" In fact, that sounded like someone else. "Grandma, I'm right here." My voice was shaking. "What's going on?" I moved one step closer. My heart was beating faster and faster. I wish I could run away. I felt like she was watching my every movement, waiting for something, and suddenly she grabbed my hand aggressively. I immediately spun around, but she let go in a split second. There she was in her chair, exactly the same. I heard breathing with a hoarse, shortened air. I got so scared in that house I couldn't sleep that night. I felt like I was being watched, and frankly, I was worried for my grandma. She was acting very odd. I shuddered to think of it, but it felt like that hand belonged to someone else. Plus, the house reeked. I was scared rats had died underneath the floorboards where Grandma slept, so I panicked and called my friend Amy, who is a nurse, to drive over. Amy was very kind to come over in the dead of the night. She started talking about how it was normal to be freaked out in the situation, but she stopped dead in her tracks when she walked around my grandma. She inspected her carefully and with worry in her eyes. "Well, will she be all right?" I think she was a bit confused earlier. "Gemma," she said. "She has been dead for days now, maybe even a week. I'm so sorry." The shock didn't set in after about a minute when she said it. How was this possible? Christ, how did I not realize this? It broke me. I realized soon after my mother had warned me not to get too close to her. No, not as some horror joke. She didn't want me to realize the breathing I was hearing was not Grandma's. That leaves me with one question today. Who the hell was I talking to? Odd couple outside Walmart. I am a drug addict, now clean, and this is one of 3 or 4 close calls I've had in my prior days living on the streets. I was hanging outside a Walmart in my city one evening. It was probably around 10 p.m. Not having much to do or anywhere to go, I was as usual just killing time. This guy approached me and we got to shooting the shit. He seemed an okay guy and explained he was just heading inside to boost a few things, and I knew a guy out in the suburbs that paid top dollar for merch. When you are on the streets, this is a quick way of scoring, trading stolen merchandise for either cash or drugs. I agreed to wait for him while he went inside, and then the plan was to hop on rapid transit to go meet this dude and score. He returned about a half hour later. We started heading to the subway and were chatting about what kind of stuff we both had to trade. I already had a few items I had scored earlier, and I was kind of looking forward to getting top dollar for my product. As he had explained, this guy was quite generous. In retrospect, I should have caught this play from the beginning, as I'm quite sharp usually, but being dope sick, I wasn't thinking very straight. All of a sudden, this girl shows up and starts walk beside us, introduces herself to us, and ends up tagging along. On the subway, there she's talking about Jesus and all these good things in her life. This disgusting twat was into none of it, but again, at that time, I was kind of oblivious. We got off at our stop and started walking to the merch dude's house. On the way there, it became very evident that the two knew each other. There was a bit of whispering going on, and what originally flagged my intel was when the Jesus talk stopped, and the sinister prostitution stories she had experienced plus some other dark stories started and persisted. Started making me nervous. We finally got to the merch guy's house. No lights on. There's obviously no one home, but the idiot dude kept knocking on the door as if the guy was expecting him. At this point, I knew there was no merch guy and this was just some random house. We left the property, and I swear to this day, the look on both their faces screamed darkness. We were walking up a hill, and he was telling me how now that his friend wasn't home, he had a plan B. I looked behind me as we were walking, and there was now another guy following us about 10 feet behind. And as we crossed the next intersection, a guy traveling towards us from the adjoining sidewalk turned in front of us and was now walking about 10 feet in front of us. Now the guy and the girl are right beside me, wedged right up next to me, and this disgusting biatch is talking about human trafficking and what happens to people during ransom scams and really scaring the shit out of me. So yeah, now alarm bells are going off full tilt, and I'm wondering what I did in this life to end up in situations like this. I said, shit, I gotta tie my shoe, and stopped. I looked down, then without looking up, I drove my foot right down into the guy's knee, which hyperextended. I punched the girl in the throat and she hit the deck. The two guys in front were now a couple feet away, coming to grab me. I slipped out to the left and sprinted across the street, all the way up to the next intersection. There was a bus coming the opposite way. I turned left and sprinted to catch it where I was pulling over to stop. I caught up to it and got on, glanced back, but there was no one behind me or chasing me. I was completely out of breath, and the bus driver just said, "Calm down, their partner. There'll be another bus in about 4 hours, when the sun rises. No need to run that fast to catch this one." I gasped the words "thank you," and the bus pulled away. In about 5 minutes, I was back to the original subway station we had gotten off at. I caught the last train back downtown, cried the whole way back. I'm a 39-year-old male. Unfortunately, scenarios like that are extremely common where I live, and most people aren't that lucky. Most people end up turning tricks or tied to a chair, tortured, and getting money extorted from their families. To that odd couple I decided to trust, let's never meet. Anyone ever experience an evil feeling in a specific place? I used to babysit this kid when I was a teen. Every single time I went over to their house, I felt this absolutely repulsive energy, completely terrible and downright disgusting vibes. I can't even explain it, pure uneasiness. Now, the two dogs he had were nervous, barked, twitched, and had to have Prozac, constantly pacing and upset. The kid I babysat refused to go to bed, to the point he would scream and cry, completely age inappropriate. And to be honest, I understand. I never said anything, but I hated tucking him in too, and would run down the stairs after. The upstairs of the house felt terrible. It felt like something was in there. I say thing because it did not feel like a person. I literally get goosebumps thinking about that. When my mom would go over to dog sit or feed the dogs, she felt the same. Years later, she brought it up to me, and we both had felt it, but never brought it up to one another. I never said anything as a teen because I wanted the pay and just thought I was paranoid. The house is just downright awful. Anyone else have this experience? No actual activity, just evil vibes? What is it? Thank you for listening. If you like this type of content, please consider subscribing and liking my channel, and I will see you on the next one.